Aussie business BlueScope Steel could benefit from Donald Trump's steel tariffs even if Australia isn't exempt. BlueScope's CEO has highlighted a 20% increase in steel prices since the tariffs were announced, indicating a positive outlook for their US operations. While there are risks from potential steel influx from China, the company remains optimistic about the United States market. And Australian Treasurer Jim Chalmers says he will raise the Trump administration's brutal blanket tariffs on foreign steel and aluminium when he meets his new US counterpart in Washington. He's on his way over. Comes as Donald Trump spruiks the power of tariffs.
Word tariff is my favorite word in the dictionary. You know, we were the richest relatively from, think of this, from 1870 to 1913. That was our richest because we collected tariffs from foreign countries that came in and took our jobs and took our money, took our everything. But they charged tariffs, and we had so much money they set up the 1887. Think of that, a long time ago, 1887 Tariff Commission. It was a commission of very important people to determine where we should spend all of the tremendous, vast wealth that we had. We had so much wealth. Wouldn't it be nice today? Of course, now we give it away to transgender this, transgender that. Everybody gets a transgender operation. It's just wonderful. No, we give it away like to crazy things. But in those days, it was different. It was a different world. It was a different country. But we were very rich because of tariffs.
Only Trump could link tariffs with transgender issues. Now, Whitlam-esque is the way that Peter Dutton has described Albanese's lifeline to Whyalla, given everything that is happening there with the bailout plan. It comes at a time where I was watching a documentary over the weekend about Australia's economy. You know, out of the OECD, we are one of the less performing when it comes to complexity of our economy. We just dig it up and send it offshore. In terms of complexity, since the 1940s and 50s, we have dropped from being one of the world's most complex industries and societies to simply relying on digging it up and then hoping that the proceeds will pay for everything else. What Trump is proposing here, essentially this blanket tariffs on steel, if Australia is caught up, could really be a huge problem for Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think the head of Hewlett Packard, Carly Perini, came out during the Sydney Olympics and she said if Australia should stop digging stuff up and farming, and it should close them all down and sell software like Taiwan, or the dollar will hit, I think she said 30 cents US.
And which direction is the dollar heading to right now?
Yeah, well, we had the biggest terms of trade gain in our history after she said that. But look, I think what that probably misses is that there's, you know, you go to Argentina, and most of the software in the wine industries from Australia. You go to different mining sites in India and Southeast Asia, and a lot of the technology in the mining sector comes from Australia. So in some ways you have complexity within mining and farming as well as other industries. But with respect to steel, it's interesting. I mean, BlueScope has said it's not cheering the tariffs on, but it has pointed out that it's probably going to benefit because BlueScope is the 5th largest steel maker in America. You know, employs 400 American steel workers. So I think for them, because they've, I guess 30 years ago, decided to be based in the places they invest in, they're actually going to benefit from the tariffs, although they do have some exports to the West Coast to make collarbone that could be affected. So it swings and roundabouts with tariffs. But I mean, the point of the time of prosperity in the late 19th century that President Trump was talking about, they had tariffs. They also had very high immigration then, and that was part of their prosperous story, which is a bit of a paradox.
Yeah, very much so. When you hear coming to take our jobs and things, we've heard that one before. It seems a bit of a loophole that BlueScope could be doing okay because it happens to have steel manufacturing in the United States, but it's just listed here in Australia. That feels like they're kind of cheating. When you have a look, we were talking in our previous conversation about net zero. Given that the current administration, Albanese's government in Australia, is pushing for net zero, there may be a coalition with the Greens, given how bad the polls look for an April election for Labor to retain power. It seems that the net zero path seems to be the most likely. What does that mean for Australian steel? And to put it in very simple terms, what's a bigger threat to Australia's steel and aluminium smelters, Donald Trump's tariffs or Anthony Albanese's push for net zero?
Well, that's right. They've got it coming at both ends. And I mean, I interviewed Mr. Gupta for the Airport Economist Climate Innovation show, and it seemed that he was able to be quite effective at picking up government subsidies for net zero, but he hadn't produced any steel. And that seemed to be the worry, and that's been driving up high prices in South Australia, for instance. And yet, on the other hand, South Australia had Elon Musk with his battery doing quite good things in South Australia. So, yeah, I think that's an issue. And I mean, I think the fact he hasn't put a lot of detail to it, but I think the fact that the opposition leader Peter Dutton has put nuclear on the table as an option should be considered seriously by policymakers and the electorate. I mean, it's not a partisan thing. I mean, Bob Hawke proposed nuclear power when he was, and he was a great Labor Prime Minister. So in some ways, the net zero thing does need all options to be considered, given what we've seen in Germany and elsewhere.
I don't have any ideological beliefs on this, but as a journalist and someone interested in a strong economy, there are some glaring problems about net zero, which is that there just doesn't appear to be a plan, an actual plan for baseload power. I'm a strong supporter of renewables because it sounds and feels much better like something we should be doing. But so does not drinking alcohol. And yet we still find ourselves every now and then having a tipple. The idea of shifting our entire economy to something that, and I'm talking about the UK, I'm talking about Germany here as well, it seems to be crazy to be able to do that when you don't yet have a plan, an ideological belief based on something that doesn't yet exist. What's your viewpoint on that? Because, as you say, nuclear seems to be the option, but because of the accidents like Fukushima, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, there's a lot of panic that how would Australia even start a nuclear industry, given our universities aren't teaching the science at the moment? We haven't even been given the ability to have the power yet. How would it actually work? And while Europe is obviously talking a lot about these ideas of small reactors, the bureaucrats are holding them all up right through Europe, right through the UK. They're not actually being built.
Yeah, it's interesting, Keir Starmer being very strong on nuclear recently. Look, I think on this issue, I'm a bit of a put the green back in the green and gold, Aaron. I mean, when we looked at the Airport Economist Climate Innovation show, we actually did see great renewable industries in Australia building back from the bushfires with renewable material. We saw a lot of renewable energy doing quite well in Australia's relationships with India and China and ASEAN. So I think Nicholas Stern put it well in the Stern report, which is we don't know the science for sure, but we can take out a little bit of insurance. And he was, I think, a little bit more sensible than the people wanting to put in these very strong Paris targets and things. I think we should. But you're talking,
but on Paris and on China, and India, Australia is looking at 2030. So is the UK. You have a look at some of the other countries like India and China. China is saying that they will be able to hit net zero 2060, and India 2070. In the meantime, China is building 2 coal-fired power stations each week, and India is building 2 each month. Where are they buying the coal from?
Well, that's a good question. And if you decided, look, it's better to face climate change as a rich economy than a poor economy. And so if Australia decides to go in really hard on these things, and as you say, China and India and Russia fill up the shortfall, the planet's not going to be better off, and we're going to be poor. So I think for that reason, I think this does need a rethink, Aaron.
All right.